Hello, my name is Jerome Hereng. I'm the VFX supervisor at Virtuos Sparx in Vietnam. And me and my team was in charge of doing the destruction for the game Age of Empire 2. And we have to come up with a tool to handle the destruction that allow consistency, because we have like more than 800 buildings to destroy, and we need some kind of consistency in terms of behavior, weight, speed, and the way that we fracture the building, so they all look different, but following some similar rule. So I would like to show you a little bit an overview of our tool. So this is one of the buildings made at Sparx by our asset team. So here we create an Houdini digital asset to handle the destruction process, and we expose some parameters to facilitate its utilization. Once the process and pipeline was mature enough, we didn't have to change much those parameters to get the final result. That way we were sure to provide consistency in the destruction behavior across the different buildings that we was working on. I will not go too much in the detail of these parameters, but I will give you an overview of the process we was using in the production of Age of Empire 2. First, the modeling was done in 3ds Max, and we have some material and material ID assigned to the geometry, and we have a script that write the path of the material ID on the geometry, and we export the whole geometry after in Alembic. So our tool read an Alembic file, and this is how the tool look like. And I will go through a different process that we was using. So first of all, we have a little bit of error checking that we do at the beginning to check if we don't have, because all our geometry need to have a certain volume to be fractured. So we check if we don't have any flat object, and to report for the asset team. And after, actually, most of the work is a preparation work where we need to link some group to a type of material. So as I told you, we define a path attribute that define the type of material, and that was really handy for us to pick which type of material we need. So for instance, here, this is how we were selecting we pick by attribute path, and you can see that here it's really easy. When I pick the wood, it will select all the geometry that have the wood material assigned to it. Or here is for the stone and some other materials. So that was kind of easy. So we can just pick and hit enter, and it will auto-select and put into the correct group. Well, so this building don't have a stash. This one is a group for the stash roof. I will come to that later, but we have several buildings that have a stash roof, and it was a challenge to incorporate that into the simulation. So we have what we specify in terms of material, because after that we drive the behavior later on in the setup. So we have stash, we have wood, all the vegetation that need to, mostly the vegetation was like ivy, stuff like that need to follow the closest geometry, because it was a lot of piece, and that gives us a satisfying result. We have grass, mostly grass like that, some little grass, and usually we just they just sink in the ground. We don't need specific things. Complex model is for all the model that sometimes we have like animation, so like for the unit, especially when we have to incorporate with the animation of a character that is dying, or if we want to, like, also for some other unit, we have to animate by hand the wheel. So we incorporate this animation into what we call complex model. We have the group FEM that is handling like all the close simulation was mostly handled by FEM simulation. And we did a few simulation using pop grain for some. We did some tearing, especially this building. We did some tearing on the close, but we cannot do that on all the building because it was a bit time consuming. We have a group that is just about collider. They will not be piped into the simulation. They will just be treated as a collider. Group solid is for mostly all the objects that are like metal. They will be fractured to have a correct model of collision, but they will not break. They will remain intact, but they will be in the simulation as well. So after we can check the result of the different material group. So here we have all the wood. Here, the FEM that will be piped in the FEM system, the rest of the building, and each material have a color that refer to a part of the system to see exactly where things will go. I would like to show you a little bit the process to break the wood. So we want some specificity for the wood is to create a long shard when it breaks, and the technique in Houdini is to squeeze the geometry in one axis, do the Voronoi, and squeeze back at its original position. So this stretch the Voronoi and create the look with the long shard. The problem here is that each piece of wood could have different orientation. So we have to find a way to have a consistent orientation to apply a procedural method to create the shard. So I will show you a little bit how this works. So we run a for each piece of wood, and we actually create an oriented bounding box. We measure the size of the face, and we sort them by this area, and we keep the biggest one. And actually we use the number of this face to create a matrix. And this matrix will help us to move to the center of the world and orient them always to the y-axis. So after we can apply the same method for each wood, which consists on, I told you, squeezing, do the Voronoi, squeeze them back. So now we have the long shard that we was looking for. In parallel of this setup, we also create a bounding box that we Voronoi with a lower number of pieces here. And we do that in parallel, and we merge them together back at their origin. Yes, yeah, this point prop bring back the object after they was actually in the center of the world, bring them back to their original position. So yeah, at the end of this for each, we export the original geometry that has been fractured here and its bounding box with the Voronoi. And I will explain you just after why we create this bounding box with the Voronoi. It's actually to create the clustering, because we don't want to pipe the whole piece of wood like that with a lot of shard into the simulation. We want to create some cluster, some group of pieces, piece of shard that will stick together. And to do so, we run through. So here in one side, we just keep the wood. On the other side, we just keep the bounding box. And for each cells of the bounding box where we apply the cluster, here, like here, for these cells, we will create a group. Oops, sorry. So here is our wood, and we will create a group with the shard that are contained within this cluster, and just keep it. We keep this one, and after we create a constraint, unbreakable constraint for this group of shard here, and we do that for all the piece. Yeah, so That's allows us to create some group of shards, and you can see the result. Yeah, here. Yeah. So this is after the clustering. So now it will become less messy when the woods break, because we cluster the group of shards together, and it will give us a better look for how the wood should break in our simulation. I would like to show you the destruction process for the building part. So this is not super complex. Everything is going in a for each loop for each object. And at the end, we get the result of the Voronoi. We did just a couple of little things, like here we, for each object, we measure their area, their size actually, and we just break the objects that are above a certain size. The small object, we leave them intact, and we spot them in red, as you can see here. All the teeny objects, we don't need to break them, and they will be piped in the simulation as they are. So once we fracture the different elements, we merge them together again, and we will take care of the constraint system for the glue constraint that hold all the pieces together. So to art direct to choose the way that we break those constraints. So we generate the constraint here. That will be piped in a glue constraint system, but we need to break those constraints to create some interesting event. So one part of the building will start to fall apart first, and another part after. So this create different timing. So we need to delete those constraints over the time, but with some interesting patterns. So we use a noise pattern inside this point VOP, just a turbulent noise that drives the color. And as you can see, when the constraints are white, they are intact, and when they turn black, they will be removed. On the other hand, we have another system that is a propagation system. So we have a base color for all the building, and another color just for the starting point of the propagation system. So this is easy. We can just pick up the starting point of the propagation. Like actually what I did here was good here and here, for instance. And we hit enter. And now it's piping the solver that will handle the propagation of the color through the constraint system. And after here we mix the different method, and you can see the result here, how we break those constraints over the time. So it gives the building a better look. It's like less boring, like all the building crumble in the same time. We have some part that crumble first and the rest later. So we have always something interesting to look at. But the problem, like if we remove all the constraints, is the whole building can become a mess quickly. So we also integrate a system of clustering, which allow us to, like you can see here, that allow us to keep some part of the building intact at the end, to be to have a better and interesting behavior. So in this part, we could select the object based on their connectivity. And we could define also art direct and say, okay, I want this piece of the building to remain intact, to be a little bit more interesting, keep some corner. enter. So we can isolate like that the piece that we don't want to break, and we generate constraint for that, and they will be pipe in the rest of the constraint network. So once we set the constraint, the behavior of the constraint that's not supposed to break, we are good to sim our building, and the simulation is nothing really special. We have here all the constraint network. So we run our sim with a bullet solver, and we just separate the object that are active from the static one. So nothing really special here. And after we export our simulation as a point, yeah, here we just export point that represent each pieces. And from the other side, we have our building where we can do a little bit of cleanup. We could upraise before we animate them using the transform pieces. So here is an example of the behavior of the wood, how the building breaks. And actually, I would like to talk a little bit about the stash roof, because we have several buildings that have stash roof, and it's made with like thousands of objects that are penetrating each other. So it's a nightmare to pipe that into a simulation system. So we have to come up with a solution to handle the specific case of the stash roof. I will show you. Here I chose another building that have a stash roof. So this is the section of the setup that take care of the stash roof. So the concept is actually on one side we keep the stash as they are. On the other side, we are using VDB from Polygon. We generate a volume that represent that contain actually our stash roof, and basically we Voronoi it. Yeah, we Voronoi the stash roof, the proxy of the stash roof, and after that we just transfer the name. Actually, this object will be piped into the simulation, and we now transfer the name of our simple geometry to the name of the packed the tiny element of the stash roof that we also pack into single object. So it's about you can see 50,000 packet primitives, so that it's a lot, and our proxy just contain 10,000 unpack. Well, just 61 pieces to simulate. If you can see here, this is in exploded view the different pieces that compose our proxy model of the stash roof. And here, when we transfer, we can also later on, when we will use the transform pieces, we will actually use the data from the proxy to animate the high-res version of the stash roof. So each of these pieces will follow the animation of the low-res version. The other part that I would like to discuss is the specific case of the dock. So we have several buildings that are above the water and need to sink in the water. So here also we define a specific behavior for the material that are assigned as wood, because wood is supposed to float a little bit in the water before it sink completely. And for a time constraint, we need to find an easy solution to handle that and visually look right. So when we have to handle the water simulation, we actually activate an attribute in our digital asset, here, water simulation. And the magic happen in the .NET, here in this subsolver that we plug in the multi-solver with the bullet solver. And it's just here in this attribute angle where for each pieces we check if they are below the water level that we define. And if it's the case, we will just push them up on the y-axis with this attribute. And the fit here is like more they are deep in the water, more we will push them hard. And but this attribute is actually reducing over the time because we remove another attribute called in water, and this in water increase over the time by 0.1. Here you can see the water absorption rate that is increased by 0.1 when it's inside the water, and if it's not in the water, it will just increase by half its value. But slowly, this attribute start at 0 and will reach 4, so that will neutralize the push water effect, and that will let the object sink in the water. So that give us the good this nice ripple effect when the piece sink and get push again and sink and push again, and slowly it didn't have the push effect anymore and it sink completely in the water. So yeah, we reached the end of the pipeline for our system. So once the simulation is done, we actually separate the outside face that was the original geometry that we pipe into our system, and the inside face that was the new face generating by the fracturing process. And we export to Alembic export for 3ds Max for rendering. We have a couple of check if we don't miss UV, if we have the correct path, because that will be important to reassign the material back in 3ds Max. And that's it. Last but not least, I would like to say a big thanks for my team lead, Lun, and the team member who participate in the evolution of the tool along the production. Thanks for watching.